Was that what you expect me to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we are going on. Yeah.
Right.
The next lecture that is from Professor Seregard. That is the president of Società Ophthalmologica Society.
So Professor Seregard is going to talk to us about the young ophthalmologist assuming the challenge.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that though I've been to Greece before quite a few times, this is the very first time in Thessalonica, and I'm really enjoying my stay. So I've taken this very seriously. I've spent the past 2 days, yesterday and the day before yesterday, preparing at a Greek monastery in Mount Athos, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I think this is absolutely something you need to do. So I'm going to talk about the young ophthalmologist assuming the challenge. Unfortunately, I don't make money out of this. I wish I did, but I don't. So basically, the world, well, last time we counted, it got some 7.2 billion people around, and there are some, believed to be something like 200,000 ophthalmologists worldwide. Now, all of these ophthalmologists, not evenly spread. I mean, this is from 2012, Seregard, WHO, made a survey, and as you see, there are a number of countries where you have a fairly large number of ophthalmologists per million population, and you have countries with very few, in particular perhaps in sub-Saharan Africa. Interestingly, the ophthalmologists, the growth rate related to the population of those in 60 years plus is a little bit different. So you have countries where, given that the population will get older and older, the ophthalmologists will actually become scarce in terms related to the older population, whereas some other countries go the other way around. So there are significant differences worldwide. Now, if you look at Europe, at geographical Europe, not the European Union, but geographical Europe, you're talking about some 730 million people altogether. And and there are some, we don't know exactly, but there are some 60,000 ophthalmologists. By and large, Europe got 11% of the world population, but 30% of the number of ophthalmologists. And again, they are not evenly spread within Europe. I mean, this is the size of national ophthalmological societies. Some of the ophthalmological societies organize most of their ophthalmologists in their own country, but some don't. So you have significant spread across Europe. And if you look at the number of ophthalmologists relating to population per million capita, there are even larger differences. So if you, in particular, if you only look at this chart, you've got Russia, you've got Sweden, Finland. So there are differences across Europe, and the UK, 45. But if you look at a few countries, like the Netherlands in particular, and Greece, you can see that there's a 5-fold difference in the number of ophthalmologists in Greece compared to those in the Netherlands. I think you knew this, by and large. There are there's a 3-fold difference compared to Sweden, and we think we have too many ophthalmologists anyway. So there are huge differences across Europe in the terms of the number of ophthalmologists relating to population. Now, if you have a large number of ophthalmologists, that poses some unique challenges. As the scope of practice, what you do as an ophthalmologist is largely related to the number of ophthalmologists you have in the population. Meaning that if you have few ophthalmologists, you would tend to focus on sort of core issues. You would focus on surgery and some medical, highly specialized medical ophthalmology. And if you have lots of ophthalmologists, you would expand your scope of practice, and they would be involved in medical ophthalmology and refractions and so on. So being at a crossroads can be confusing, and being a young ophthalmologist is certainly confusing because you've got so many subspecialties to choose from, and perhaps you want to be a comprehensive ophthalmologist. And what's a comprehensive ophthalmologist in one country, not necessarily the same thing as being a comprehensive ophthalmologist in another country. In Sweden, for instance, cataract surgery is believed to be subspecialized, whereas in the US, a comprehensive ophthalmologist would do cataract surgery. So if you look at the sort of large range of European subspecialty societies, and this list is by no way complete. I probably missed out a few. You can see at the high end, you got ESCRS, the European Society of Cataract Refractive Surgeons. They got more than 5,000 members. And at the other end, you got the European Ophthalmic Pathology Society, which I also happen to be president of. I'm resigning now within a month, and we got about 40 members. You can imagine the difference you have in the infrastructure and the support of these organizations, whether it's cataract and refractive, which has a huge staff, or at the other end, you've got ophthalmic pathology, and we basically have no support at all. So there are differences between subspecialty societies, which are quite significant. So you all know that there are endangered animals. Well, I put it to you that there are also endangered subspecialties. If you look at the United States, at least, and things from the US tend to come into Europe for better or worse, neuro-ophthalmology, uveitis, pediatric ophthalmology, I'm sorry, David, but that's what they say in the US anyway. I'm not sure about the UK. And ophthalmic pathology are subspecialties that are felt to be threatened in the United States. Doesn't necessarily mean that the same subspecialties are threatened in any one country in Europe, but that's the US position. And the common denominator is basically that these subspecialists make less money. No, it's all about money anyway in the US. So the American way to subspecialize is that some subspecialists, make less money and some make more money. And it depends on your interest, but also, of course, if you, how much money you want to make. So based on the average earnings of last year in the US is close to $300,000, which makes ophthalmology number 10 out of 25 specialties. This still is up 5%, which is ophthalmology is the third highest rise in the number of specialties. So in this sense, ophthalmologists do reasonably well in the US. But there's a low end and there's a high end. And the low end, you had neuro-ophthalmologists, which makes something like $150,000 a year. And at the high end, you have retina specialists, in particular those retina specialists who inject intraocular drugs. They would make 500,000 plus, something like that. So that's a threefold difference within a single subspecialty. And just recently, they released the data from the US, that was 2 months ago, about the Medicare reimbursements. It's not the money they make, but it's the money they bill Medicare for the procedures they do. And out of the top 10 specialists in the US, counting every specialty, gynecology, radiology, 3 out of 10 were ophthalmologists. And number 1 was an ophthalmologist as well. And that ophthalmologist, who happened to be a VR surgeon in Florida, billed Medicare $20.8 million in 2013. $12 million out of those was for intraocular injections. That doesn't mean they made $20 million, but they billed, including the drugs, $20.8 million, which is, as you know, quite substantial. Now, if you have a small number of ophthalmologists, that poses also unique challenges. The scope of practice is, as I said, is largely defined by the number of ophthalmologists, and again, depends on how many ophthalmologists you have, is what you're doing. Now, in the UK, and I asked David actually, just before we actually walked in, you have something called medical ophthalmologist, which could be sort of an ophthalmologist that focused on medical issues. But interestingly, they have a sort of a hybrid version, which is you can actually do 2 years of training in internal medicine and then add on 4 years of training in medical ophthalmology, and you become a medical ophthalmologist. I don't know exactly how many they have, but again, if you have few ophthalmologists, then you could sort of train staff in various ways to sort of compensate for that, the few ophthalmologists you have. So these medical ophthalmologists would do something like this, uveitis, vasculitis, etc., etc. And of course, you could have someone starting off in ophthalmology and then focus the medical ophthalmology. But I think the interesting thing is that you have a hybrid. You have the technical possibility of a hybrid version, that is someone that's started off as an internist and then gone on to do ophthalmology. This is the Royal College of Ophthalmology website, where they actually recognize that there's a subspecialty which is called medical ophthalmology. And this is the Royal College of Physicians website, again, with the medical ophthalmology. Probably not that many around. No one I've spoken to knows exactly how many there are, but it's interesting. You also have nurse practitioners as another way to support you when you've got few numbers of ophthalmologists. And what the sort of nurse practitioners would do depends on different countries. So they would independently or semi-independently practice medicine. In the United Kingdom, in Finland, and northern part of Sweden, they perform intravitreal injections to some extent. I think it's different across center from center, but it's certainly possible to delegate that task to give intravitreal injections to a nurse. It's certainly possible in Sweden. It all depends on how many ophthalmologists you have, what you want to do. In Sweden, it's gone so far that you've got nurse practitioners in other specialties that would do diagnostic ultrasonography, they would perform endoscopies, and they have a right in Sweden to prescribe a range of drugs. That it gives you some idea of what you could actually, because if you don't have enough people, you'd bring other supporting people from, like nurses or optometrists. In Sweden, typically you would have dispensing opticians or refracting opticians. That's what we have in Sweden. In Sweden, optometrist is basically not recognized as such. We do have a training program for optometrists. They become masters of optometry. They do a 4th-year add-on. But there's nothing really called optometrist. It's not legally protected. You can't call yourself a physician unless you are a medical doctor. Anyone can call themselves an optometrist. So that means that technically they are still opticians. But there are separate training programs, of course, in the UK and the US for optometrists. And the key issue, if optometrist really is sort of perceived as attractive, is if you get independent reimbursement, or if your reimbursement is based on that you're part of a larger practice where typically would be run by an ophthalmologist. So again, it's different in Europe, in continental Europe, different in the UK, different in the US. But certainly if you don't have enough ophthalmologists, you tend to get nurse practitioners, optometrists, medical ophthalmologists, or whatever. And of course, the traditional optician optometrist who do refractions and charts, but they've now gone on in many countries to expand their scope of practice. And this is a sort of a completely different issue. This is not something I'm going to talk about today, but my American colleagues could talk about this for hours and hours. So the question is, do we all need to subspecialize in the future? Is there a need for comprehensive ophthalmologists? Is it something we should fear? We have optometry or nursing practitioners sort of barking up the tree. Is it a divide emerging between comprehensive ophthalmologists and subspecialized ophthalmologists? This slide tells you what's happening in internal medicine, where you had only a fraction of internists in some countries that would be comprehensive. In Sweden, 85% of specialists in internal medicine would only do as subspecialty like cardiology, hematology, and so on. And Greece is a bit on the way as well, 40%. UK is 20%, according to this paper, which is from last year. So subspecialization is something that certainly happens in other specialties as well. So how are you going to address this? Well, you need to look straight and have a clear vision, and you can see this ophthalmologist does not obviously look straight. You need to get everyone on board, your comprehensive ophthalmologist as well as your subspecialists, because we are all physicians. You have to realize that different people will have different agendas depending on what sort of agenda you have. You may look at things differently. What sort of plans you have, you will have different ideas, and certainly these two do. And you need to identify where the problems are, because if you don't know where the danger is, you don't really know what to do. So I'm going to end my talk saying that we need both the comprehensive and the subspecialist ophthalmologist. So even if you are sort of unique, one in a line, you need to recognize that you are actually just one of a team of ophthalmologists. And just because you are unique doesn't mean that you're all that useful. You need to be able to fit into the team. So by that, I think you need to bring cohesion to your national ophthalmology, because each and every one of us is unique, whether we are comprehensive or subspecialists, and we all need to work together to sort of promote ophthalmology. So by this, I'd like to thank you very much, and I certainly hope that all of you will go to Vienna on June 6 to 9. And I'd like to specifically thank the organizers for putting this SOE session together. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think Greece is the first country in Europe that has established permanently a session for education with lectures from international icon and SOE. It is necessary for us because we believe that knowledge is basic for us. But Professor Taylor and Professor Seregard, I believe that we must cooperate more between us, because most of the Greek young ophthalmologists, they are giving examination in IMBO, so we must find a way, Mrs. Portaglio, is your way, how we correlate this to be also in this part of examinations. It is necessary for us.
I agree with you.
Because we have a very good ophthalmology, young ophthalmologists. And the main point is that we have established in our Congress a SOE session. That is, Professor Seregard, I believe it is necessary for all countries to establish this session, because in this way we can communicate young ophthalmologists of different countries between us. So if you have any questions or comments, please go on, and after we have to go on to the young ophthalmologist session. Do you have any comments? Dr. Anastasakis, how do you feel about this, that Professor Seregard and Professor Taylor sent about examination in ICO and Europe? What is your opinion? Because we must hear your voice. Otherwise, microfono? Microfono?
Point that Professor Seregard stressed about comprehensive ophthalmologists and medical ophthalmologists, all of that is quite important, because as he showed in the map, with so many ophthalmologists being in Greece and so few in Sweden and all of that, is an important point for me, because it looks like that apart from educating new ophthalmologists better or in a more specialized and strict fashion, it's important to reorganize the whole thing from the beginning, because, let's say, Greece, as we all know, has so many surgeons, while it doesn't have so many patients to be operated. And on the other hand, Greece doesn't have any medical ophthalmologists that are quite important for those that know what this means. So, from those two lectures, for me, I really want to underline what Professor Seregard said about the medical ophthalmologist. That's a specialization that you can call it a new one, but I think it's really important, it's really needed. And so instead of people trying to think about fellowships in VR surgery or whatever type of surgery that possibly they will end up unemployed, they can possibly think about this type of more clever solutions and being more comprehensive or more medical, since that's what we miss. That's what I want to make a comment.
Do you have to do any comments on this comments of Professor? Do you have to do any comments? Stefan?
Well, I think you're perfectly right. If you are going to stick with the number of ophthalmologists you have to make sure you provide relevant work for them. So, because it's the differences across Europe is staggering. And when we know we're getting more people in Sweden, young Greek ophthalmologists or trainees that come to Sweden, and that's something we have seen in the past 10 years. It didn't used to be like that, but that's something happening. So I think at the end of the day, you need to consider how many medical doctors and how many ophthalmologists you actually need. But if you're going to sort of stick with these numbers, you have to make sure that they get a sort of a decent work.
Dr. Shiru, have you to say anything about this lectures of Professor Seregard and Professor Taylor? Please, the microphone. Quickly, because we have... it is nice to have the opinions of your opinions, to know what is going on, to be in the practical topic.
As far as we're concerned about the education,
microphone,
I'm a bit
please.
of bias because I'm the Greek representative to the IBO.
Yeah.
So, and I was one of the first persons that I had to promote for the Europeans to give these exams, because we need to have a common basis that all the countries, we know that our doctors, they are safe to work from one country to the other country. So it was important to have at least one exam.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Salvanos from Sweden is a young ophthalmologist who is in Sweden now.
Thank you so much.
Panayotis.
From Norway. Well, thank you for both presentations. I would like to ask Professor Taylor, you were talking about the exams. Are there any other prerequisites if some young ophthalmologist wants to do a fellowship? Or you showed the website for the ICO assessment. Is everything included there? Do you have to have a previous surgical experience in that field that you plan to subspecialize or do the fellowship? Thank you.
Have we got about half an hour? Actually, thanks for that question, but I think the exams our 3 exams are all completely different. The foundation assessment is an online, instant results, learning experience, and it did have if you just go to the ICO exams website, just go ICO and then exams and then website, or go to that, if you took it down, go to that URL, and you get a trial and gives you an idea of what it's about. This is actually suitable for taking in a variety of different sort of scenarios. So it could be in a developing country. It's actually mostly been designed around Europe and North America, and in particular thinking of those people. But if you are one of those people, you have to have a thought that you're not just an isolated person sitting in Europe, that the questions are sort of from round and about. The other exams, the one that would be of less interest to you in Greece, I think, is now our standard exams, which is our big numbers exam. And the reason for this is that currently you use the EBO exam. I think the advantage of the ICO exam, in addition to the EBO exam, is that you can take it in your own country. As you saw, there's some Greek candidates this year and quite a lot from other European countries, 322 in all. And it's relatively inexpensive, and so you don't have to travel to Paris to take it. You can take it not necessarily at home, but in your own country and sometimes in your own city. And its pass rate is between 55% and 60%, so it is actually quite a tough exam. As I said, it's a hallmark of something, you've done something, a real achievement. And the advanced exam is that much, is really for a much more well-informed person who's current in ophthalmology.
Yes, thank you. So we have to go on in the next session that is for young ophthalmologists, but before this, I want to know what the young ophthalmologists from Greece, they want to know, they want to know more from Society of Ophthalmological, European Ophthalmological Society. Dr. Georgiadis, Odysseas, what do you wait from European Ophthalmological Society? Tell me your soul, what are you awaiting? The truth. Because you have representatives here. So you must say what you are waiting from them. Please, the microphone. What do you want?
I would hope for at least common standards for all the European young ophthalmologists. Common training standards, not only surgical but theoretical standards also.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Portaglio, you have to go on to the next session.
Before we do that, we have the SOE lecturer, Dr. Foudi, who is going to talk to us.